Hello guys, it's great to see you. So we are here a little bit late, apologies, but we had a few technical issues. I would like to introduce you to the lovely David Somerville, who is just the most fantastic person. He is so generous with his time and he has really been helping me. So thank you. So what we're going to be doing is talking about PEMF. So we're going to be talking about pulsed electromagnetic field therapy today. I think the title might be slightly wrong, so apologies guys. This is PEMF today. And we're going to basically be going through the theory. We're going to be talking about the variables. We're going to be talking about the uses, and we're going to be talking about the context to use it. But first of all, let's all give a massive hand and listen to the lovely David Somerville. Please tell us a little bit about yourself so people can have confidence in what you say.
Oh, I've done nothing in my life, really. I originated from Sheffield, and I'm a secondary modern schoolboy, if you like, who left school without qualifications. But I came good later on, and I studied as a mature student to get a doctorate. And but I went via the Air Force. I was in the Air Force for a long time, and then I worked in industry, in the computing industry. Then became a student for 4 years for a degree in physics, chemistry and education. Then I studied for a further 5 years, plus the write-up time for an MSc in orthopedic mechanics and a doctorate in clinical orthopedic research. So I've covered a whole lot, but I've worked on computers and I've worked on electronics. I've designed electronic equipment, and that's where I am today, really. I started then to lecture at a university. I became a senior lecturer in physics and physical sciences. That is to cover quite a research supervisor to doctoral students, PhD students, studying aspects of orthopedics. But I must say that it was human orthopedics, not animal orthopedics. So it's a bit of a difference. There is a difference, but there's a lot of similarities, put it that way. And I developed equipment basically to help human bones to heal. And I use this book, actually. I brought it out. I've had this book for about 28 years. Okay, it's Tora and Grabowski. Forget this the right way around.
Wow,
see that?
That's a tome.
It's a thick book, and one reference in it that's triggered me off is this reference just down here, which I don't know if you can see, but there's a reference.
No, I can't see clearly.
Where my finger is there. And it's a reference to pulse magnetic therapy. And it's the first reference I ever found. And it was talking about how it healed, how it's not healed, but aided the healing of bones. And that's where I really got interested in it and developed things from there on. So that's sort of.
So you have got a little bit of a declaration. So you are an advisor for a couple of companies, including Westville Therapy.
Yes, yeah.
So we just do declarations to let people know.
Yeah. Well, I formed Westville Therapy because when I started to look out at equipment and what have you, and I looked at the research, nothing that I saw out there would match the research. So I thought, well, I'm an electronics engineer. I can do this to myself. And with the aid of a company called Bardwell's in Sheffield, who I used to deal with quite a lot when I was at the university in Sheffield for a time, and subsequently, while I've been doing other things, my research, they helped me an awful lot with my research. And I acquired a few little bits and pieces from them, and I thought I can make something out of this. And that was the basis of the first pulse magnetic therapy device I developed. I put it then out to a therapy group to try it out, and they came back with very glowing reports on its success. And I'd built it to actually match the research. So I would have expected it to work according to everything else. So yeah.
So just to clarify, the actual device itself hasn't been tested itself, but all of the parameters used are parameters that have featured heavily in the research.
There's a lot of research out there. A lot of people say, oh, there's nothing out there. There's a whole world of research out there, various universities and what have you. And I just simply went through, and a lot of the papers you've probably seen online under my previous name of Laycock, because I used to be, just a brief history, I was brought up by a single parent. My parents were divorced when I was very young. And when my mother remarried at the age of 12, she changed my name to Laycock, which I didn't particularly like. And when I lost my mother a few years ago, I decided, right, for the rest of my life, I'm going to go back to my birth name.
You did confuse me this morning. I was like,
yeah. Which is Sommerville, yeah. So a lot of the things online, if you put in Dr. D.C. Laycock, PhD, you find a lot of magnetic therapy papers online, and a lot of companies quoting me because of that.
And I have. I've been looking today.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I've been in the world of David Somerville, who also is known as David Laycock. Right, so let's crack on. So the reason that I just wanted to clarify that is there are a lot of products out there, and the same with supplements, the same with medications. We always do say, has that particular product been trialed and tested? Now, there is a slight difference with electrical equipment, because you can choose the parameters, the hertz, so the frequency, the intensities, and slightly different in supplements, medications. But just to clarify, Westville itself hasn't put their product specifically for a trial. You're using parameters that have featured heavily in previous trials. Is that right?
Right, of course, yes. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, just to clarify that for people. So let's crack on. I've got a list because it's such a complicated subject. So let me start. We're going to start with pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. Let's learn about magnetism. Just give people a basic understanding about magnetism, and then we're going to lead on to the difference between static magnets and pulsed electromagnetic therapy.
Magnetism, what is it? A lot of people say it's a magic sort of substance that emanates from magnets, and you've got magnets from very small ones like this, which are very the neodymium magnets, which we use for testing equipment, testing the field. That's a static magnet, of course. Magnetism is an effect, and it's effective current flow. Basically, where you get current flowing, when all those little particles called electrons, which make current flow along a wire, for instance, they push each other so much, then they form a field at 90 degrees to each other. And that field is part of that compression. It's like if you have a water pipe and you put high pressure in the water pipe will expand, okay? Well, in this way, it's down at what we would call a quantum level, but you get an expansion of some of the energy of the motion. And as you switch it off, it will collapse back into it, as would a water pipe. I mean, basically, if you think about the aorta, as the heart pumps blood at high pressure, the actual aorta expands and it puts pressure back into when it collapses or reduces it, and it smooths the flow of blood around your body. So there's an example of energy stored at right angles to the flow. And that's exactly what happens with electricity, and you get that pulse, that going out and what have you. So pulse magnetism is the current is switched on and off, so you get the expansion and the retraction, back into the wire. So you actually put energy back into it.
Yeah.
So
I had to go back to complete basics because I had to learn what a magnet is. I had to learn how you can create a magnetic field with electricity. It was like, whoa, now I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And then from there, I could understand the difference between a static magnet and electromagnetism and the pulse nature of it.
Well, the big difference with static, it's the crystal structure. We've got little things called domains, magnetic domains. And it's basically where the electrons, if I don't want to go too technically, because I think we don't want to lose any people, but it's where the electrons spin around. And because electrons move, they form a little magnetic field. And basically, if you've got all of these domains lined up, then those magnetic fields add together, and it forms a field flowing around the actual material itself. And basically, that then radiates out because it's a natural current that's within the material at the subatomic level. It forms a field, and the field is static because there's no variation in that current. And therefore, that's a static field. It doesn't have the ability to do anything unless you interact with it in some way, and you have to have dynamic interaction with it. But that's
so going back historically, and I was reading some of your work about this, supposedly magnetic material was some sheep farmer was walking along and the nails of his boots kind of adhered to a rock, and that's discovery of magnetism. So it was the metal.
Magnus of Magnesia, 600 BC, yes.
600 BC, there you go. He was walking along with his little hobnail boots, and he kind of walked across some rock, and he kind of found it quite hard to actually remove his foot from said rock, and discovery of the material that had a magnetic principle.
Yeah, yeah.
From that in history, you see it being used in a static form in Cleopatra's headdress, for example, and it features throughout history.
Yeah.
Have you heard that one? That Cleopatra supposed
I've heard people say that it's been used in therapy from Cleopatra. So there's no evidence of that whatsoever. There's no evidence whatsoever. It is a myth put around. It's a mysterious. It's been used. I mean, the Saxons used it, and the Vikings used it because it's a little bit of a rock, and if they hung it on a string, it would line itself with the Earth's magnetic field, and so they could navigate by it. But basically, as a therapy, it's quite a myth that people put out. They wouldn't know what it was. They wouldn't know whether it was therapeutic. They didn't know the understanding of cellular structures we have today. They didn't know anything about that. So
but do you think it was because of, as you say, the fact on the end of a string it would move of its own accord and no one could explain the movement?
Oh, it was
there
mysterious.
Must have been mystical powers.
It must have been absolutely magic for them. It's just something that they wouldn't understand. They wouldn't understand about the Earth's magnetic field. They would probably look up at the aura and say it was the gods throwing bolts at the Earth or something, the aurora borealis, which is all to do with magnetism, of course. But they wouldn't know about that. It's just something that they has been conjured up by people trying to say, well, magnets have been used in therapy for thousands of years. But I've never seen anything about that, and I've done quite a bit of research on it.
I am being terribly misleading. I'm leading, not misleading. I am leading with these statements because I've wanted to deal with the fact that there's a lot of historical reference. There's a lot of wives' tales. There's lots of people saying, well, it's been used for years, and I think we just need to deal with that quite quickly so that we can get into science.
I mean, sorry, it has been used for years, but it's only about 30, 40 years ago that it really started to be used in therapy.
Right, there you go. We've nailed it already.
We're talking about pulse magnetic therapy, of course. Yeah.
Pulse magnetic, so completely different thing. So let's finish the static magnet thing. Okay. So something that I read, which I think was really powerful, that made me suddenly go, okay, yes. Static magnets, do they offer any relevant clinical benefit? So I know when I read your textbooks, because you're such a scientist, you go into the minute detail, but then at the end of a section you'll say, but clinically that doesn't amount to anything. So I know static magnets can do tiny things, but when you say in practice, what can that actually do? Do static magnets lead to clinical change?
No.
In simple terms.
The only way you could get a static magnet to actually have any effect, is to get a magnet like this and shake it at 50 times a second. Like that, 50 times a second. You might get some effect, right? It has to vary, and it has to vary at high speed to be of any use whatsoever. A static magnet cannot affect cellular structures. A static magnet cannot affect blood. A lot of people say, oh, blood is affected by magnetism. It isn't. Goodness me, if it was, you'd explode if you went into an MRI scanner. That's absolutely...
Yes, another thing. I read that and I just went, well, that answers quite a lot, because that's one hell of a magnetic field that you would put your organic body in. If blood was influenced by a magnetic field, we would be dead as soon as that MRI scanner went on. Basically.
Well, there's no evidence after anybody has been in a scanner, if they've been through an MRI scanner, there is absolutely no evidence that they've actually been in that strong magnetic field. They use a very strong magnetic field because the only effect you can get, when you get something like 3 or 4 Tesla, which is the strength of the field, and it's 10,000 Gauss per Tesla, so you've got to think about the strength of it, okay? There's only the effect you get is a very weakly diamagnetic hydrogen atoms, molecules. And what they do is they line up, and while they're in the field, the little hydrogen weakly so weak it is that they line up while they're in the field, and basically they shoot a radio pulse through them. It causes them to flip, and in flipping they send a little EM signal back, electromagnetic signal back, which is detected, and that's all it does. But once you've switched it off or you move the person out of it, there's no evidence whatsoever that they've been in it.
Okay, my second, and I haven't prepped you for this one because you're going to be shocked. In car breakers yards, when you see these massive magnets that come down and they take the car up, take them across and drop them, that's electromagnetic field, but it's still static, isn't it?
It is a static one, yeah, yeah.
So no one would ever be able to work in that breaker's yard if it had any kind of health effects.
Absolutely.
It's damn dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, there was an old chap I dealt with, which Chris and Lorraine Bardwell knew as well, because he was a regular attendee of the shop. And he used to tell me that he worked in the steelworks in Sheffield. And he used to walk in and out of the smelters which use electromagnetism, like a cooker, you know, the actual magnetic cookers you get these days. He used to walk in and out of these strong fields that were by the smelters. And he claimed it had no effect on it. If, in fact, he used to say to me, I've lived till 90, and it's because of God's gift to the universe, to the people, and that great gift is pulsating magnetism. Okay. But that was pulse magnetism. It wasn't static, because static magnet simply would not heat the metal. Okay, if you look on our, we have one of these induction cookers. If you have a dirty great magnet, something of this strength, this is a very strong one, as I've showed you before. If you put it under a pan, nothing's going to happen. Okay? Nothing whatsoever is going to happen. It has to pulse. And the pulse actually causes the induction into the metal at the base of the pan, which then starts to shake all the molecules around, if you like, in simplistic terms. And those cause the heat, which causes the thing. But the magnetism by itself won't do anything. It absolutely will not do anything.
No. So, I'm going to be dangerous. When we see blankets or the bracelets or the collars,
yeah,
can that be a pulsating magnetic field, or are they officially static?
It depends on the type of field. I mean, there are blankets that are made which are specifically pulsing fields, and they have coils in them, and they are built-in coils. And I think Chris does a very good one as well. Chris Bardwell does a very good one, and it's something you can put an animal on, okay, and they will pulse, and it's a weak field that they give out, but it's sufficient to cause changes in tissue. The ones with magnets built into them, again, if they're static magnets, then I think they are more placebo than anything else, if anybody says that. Okay,
so if we were looking at a little bracelet that I'm going to be wearing around my wrist,
yeah,
is it physically possible for a electromagnet pulsing one to be incorporated into a thin band of material? Because I've got your equipment, I've got the Westville equipment.
Yeah. Okay,
but this is a piece of kit. This is a battery that I have to charge up at the mains to store my battery for me to use it remotely, and it's a kit. It's not a bracelet. So when you look at these bracelets, etc., you can't imagine there is enough equipment in there to create a pulsating electromagnetic field, or am I being too simplistic?
You can't. I mean, you've got to target, basically, with pulse magnetism, you've got to target what the tissue that you want to treat. What you're doing with magnetism is you're changing the actual potentials, and you're causing charges within the tissue. And how it does it, in a very, very simple terms, is that you've got lots of these things called electrons that we've talked about flowing in the body between atoms. We're made up of billions upon billions upon billions of atoms, and there's an exchange of electrons all the time, going backwards and forwards very randomly. We don't particularly create a magnetic field ourselves, but in terms of the if we pulse a magnetic field through it, then it forces those electrons to move to one side, and in moving alongside it creates it creates a charge. Okay, and it's that charge, if it's in an area where you've got depleted voltages on damaged cells, then it will help the cells restore their normal potentials and help them to function. So if you've got injuries and things like that, that's
okay. I'm being a cow. I am being a total cow with what I'm doing. I am trying to push you into a corner to answer just a very pressing question, because there is so many pieces of equipment online freely available for people to read late at night and feel, God, that sounds scientific. That's got a few references underneath it. That must work. It's veterinary approved, clinically approved. It's got a load of quotes. But in my mind, it's not possible that a watch battery lined up with a few coils can fit into a bracelet that can actually offer an electromagnetic field that pulsates around my whole body, and that on my wrist can affect my ankle.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's a lot of people think it does, because they'll say, I put it on my wrist, even a static magnet, I put it on my wrist, and the pain in my back went. Well, if you believe that, then fair enough. If people feel that that gives them some sort of comfort and what have you, they can believe it. But in fact, there's no evidence whatsoever that the magnet on your wrist will affect the rest of your body. There's no evidence it will affect the blood. It can't affect anything else. It will not affect the nerves or anything like that. It cannot affect tissue, basically. And a pulsating one on the wrist, not really. There was a thing called TriMed many years ago, which people used to put on the wrist, and it gave a very, very energetic pulse in the radio frequency band, okay? And that pulse could be detected at the brain, but it was not necessarily by the body. It was detected by other equipment at the head because it was radiating from the wrist. You know, it was radiating out like a small transmitter that you get nowadays. You know, you might as well say that one of these magic watches you buy nowadays, the Apple Watch and things like that, that radiates because it's radiating at very high frequencies. It doesn't affect the rest of your body in any way, shape, or form. So why should it? Why should a small pulse?
Okay. So I think we've done static. So whether it's a collar on a dog, somebody's talking about their horses, whether it's you know fetlock covers, whatever it is. If it's a static magnet that hasn't got an electrical source that's going to be able to fluctuate an electromagnetic field, then the evidence to support any clinical benefit is
it's anecdotal. As I say, the people will. I think we spoke about this once before. They get celebrity endorsements, they get all sorts of things like that about these things, and people think, "Wow, it must work if they endorse it." But there's no evidence in science to support that static magnets can do anything to the body. As I said before, anything that they do would have to be at a level far beyond any little magnet you stick on your wrist to actually cause even just this basic alignment of hydrogen ion molecules. Which is the only effect of a static magnet. Yeah.
Fine. I think that's good. And if anybody needs to quote any of this, quote either my car yard electric magnets or the scanner. That is a take home for you to be able to say, So let's move on to pulse electromagnetic field therapy. Can we talk about the construct? So we're not talking about a one-off item like your magnet there. It's a standalone item because it's a magnetic material. You're talking about using electrical coils that create a magnetic field. Now, that's something that I had to really get my head around because I'm not physical science. I was just like, I only ever saw magnets as fridge magnets. I never realized, okay? So this is why I'm a really good host and interviewer because I struggle with this stuff. So you can, guys, this is amazing, coil a wire and that in itself will create an electromagnetic field.
If you pass a current through it, yes. If you pass a DC current through it, okay, you get a static field out of it, which has been no use whatsoever. If you create a pulsing current through it, basically the wire, as it's close to the wire, you probably remember at school, then you get, if you put a wire through a piece of paper, and you get one of these little compasses and put them around and find that there's a field around it, okay? Well, if you coil it all up, all those little, each wire generates its own magnetic field, and each one adds to the other, okay? So you have a few hundred turns, as we do in these coils, then you get a few hundred times what you get in a single wire, and it all adds up. And it actually forms a circular, not a circular, but a continuous loop, which goes through the coil. And that's the same as a static magnet, if it's a static current, and you get the same sort of field out of it. But when you start to pulse it...
That's what I found amazing, because I can remember from physics at school where you have the rectangle magnet, you have north and south, and you have those radiating lines of magnetic fields. And then you can actually create that with this coil.
Yes, you can,
You can have the radiating magnetic lines, and you can have north and south. And I was like, that's really, really clever, that is. But
can I just make a point there? There's no difference between north and south. A lot of people say north is something like south is painkilling, the north for static magnets. There's no difference whatsoever in terms of the field. The field is a continuous field, and wherever it comes from is the north, and wherever it goes to is the south. Okay. And that's the way it goes around, north to south. And it doesn't matter where you look along the wire or along the field, you've got north, south, north, south, north, south, all around. And it's just so what's coming out of tissue, for instance, with a static field, just to go back to static, is south on the inside, north on the inside, south on the outside. I may have got that wrong because I've got my notes with me at the moment, but it's the same or the same. So it's exactly the same. So there's no difference whatsoever.
Yeah,
so
and I think, and another wives' tale to deal with is there is no therapeutic benefit of the south being in touch with the body compared to the north.
Absolutely, none whatsoever. There's no evidence whatsoever. It's all
dealt with that too.
It's gobbledygook from people trying to sell these things and making them sound technical.
Okay, so we've got our solenoid, which is our coiled wire.
Yeah, that comes from the Greek meaning to channel. Yeah.
To channel. But again, if we just put it on a direct current and just left it sitting there, it's still going to offer no benefit.
It wouldn't offer any benefit whatsoever, no. No.
Right. So the key to this is this amazing thing called an alternating current.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
All in how frequent that current is changing, and that's our baseline, isn't it? So let's talk about this. Pulse yet? We're talking about our baseline frequency and how that has a massive influence.
Well, basically, what it is about pulse magnetic therapy, as opposed to static, is the change from being off to being on. Okay, that's the inductive quality of pulse magnetic therapy. So we use square waves. Okay, we switch it on, it's onto the top, it becomes a static field again. Then we switch it off, it becomes a moving field. As we switch it on, it will induce a charge like that. As we switch it off, it'll do a charge like that. I don't know if you can see my fingers there. Up like that, down like that. We have demonstrations at the university to show that. Okay, so you've got two charges, two momentary charges from it. But the static bit, when it's stationary, when it's actually on as a square wave, when it's not moving at the top, does no good whatsoever. Oh, obviously, when it's off, it doesn't do any good either. So it actually is the change in the actual magnetic field that causes the induction. Okay, and that's important because if you've got a slow changing magnetic field, you get a very small induction. If you've got a very high fast changing induction, which is what you need in therapy, especially in orthopedics, then you get a nice charge build up, and that charge is processed by the bone. Right. I could go into details of it, but I don't think you want me to.
Be careful. We're still keeping it simple. Remember, it's my brain, not So this base frequency can be anywhere in medical value of medical value between, was it 50 hertz and 200 hertz, or was it 5?
The reason we have the base frequency, the actual bit that does the effect is the actual pulsing bit between them. So we have various things like 510 to 70.5, 25 times per second or whatever, and we're pulsing that base frequency on. It's like having a light. If you imagine light is the base frequency, then as I turn the switch on and off, that's the pulsing side of it. Okay, and it's the base. What it happens is you build up charges, and you have to. I always call them the assimilation time. Then we give a little gap, and that allows the charges to disperse. Okay, and it'll cause changes within the tissue. Then it'll come on again. So the various frequencies that we do that at are the 510, the base frequencies. The base frequency provides a lot of these leading edges and trailing edges, induction and sort of inducing charges. And the frequency that they pulse at allows for a particular time of those charges. And then there's a gap. Okay, there's what we call a Mark-Space ratio. I won't go into that. But a Mark-Space ratio gap where nothing happens. And that allows the actual, it's like pushing something, it's like tapping something. If you put a hammer on a nail and just let it sit there, it won't do anything. Okay, if you tap it a few times, the nail will go in, and you don't have to tap it hard either. Okay, so you're actually giving it the taps. Basically, you're actually causing you're stimulating the tissue. Yeah.
So what that does tell us as well for the skeptics, for the people that are trying to use something that's got some evidence, is that you're going to be dealing with a modality that has two reference points. We've got a base frequency and we've got a frequency.
Yes.
And that really is quite important. And we know we have different benefits with different things. So the base frequency could be between, I can't remember, but it was 50 to 200 hertz or something like that.
Yeah, on these sort of units, you can see this one here. This is a fairly well-established one now. You can see that that is the pulsing units. Okay,
yeah,
back to front on me.
yeah,
and this one here, the base frequencies. You'll find there's 1200 on there, which we'll talk about tomorrow. There's 1400 on there, but there's 250 are the base frequencies. And the reason we have 200 is that from research again, okay, by having the higher frequency of stimulation, we can affect nerve endings, and we can change the potential of nerve endings where we've got chronic pain, for instance, where we're actually attracting pain not particles, but pain prostanoids, okay, from damaged cells that are taken up by C-type nerves, very close, slow transit nerves, and they give you chronic pain. What we're trying to do is change the potential of the nerve endings that accept those neurotransmitters and stop the pain being transmitted. So it actually reduces the amount of chronic pain. And 200 is bound to be one of the most effective ones. The actual fact, some of the research went higher than that, but you've got a problem if you go too high with pulse magnetism, is that the coils cannot handle it, because the rise and collapse of the coil start to interfere with the next pulse that comes along, and eventually, instead of getting a nice pulse, you get a ripple. Okay. So we limit it to 200. Yeah.
So that's for the cynics, for the people that are trying to work out what they believe in, what seems safe, what seems to have science. You're looking at a product that's got two variables.
Yeah.
Base frequency and a pulse frequency. If you're not being given options, be cynical, because the choice of base and pulse have different clinical benefits. So some base vasodilation, some can cause constriction.
There are two main ones. Yeah, there are two main ones we use on that one, which I think is important to know. Is that we use the 17.550 as it's one of the main ones, and it's the main one used for soft tissue vasodilation, soft tissue cellular repair. Okay, and that's a standard one. We use 50 constant for orthopedics. Okay, because we want to induce a lot of charges into bone, and the charges are processed by the bone. Again, it's in the book how it works.
We're going to come into that.
Are processed by the bone. We want to build up those charges in bone around areas where you've got problems. And so we have the 100, the 200 again, as I say, and I tend to use that as a constant, or you can use it on 200 on 5, just to give it a little bit of a gap. And that will allow the changes in nerve endings. Now, these are all clinically proven changes, by the way. They're not something that I've just dreamt of.
No, and that's what I found really interesting. Again, you haven't been prepped for this, because I'm going to, I love doing this, totally scared. When I was reading your book, and we're going to talk about the books if people want to read more about this, your tabulated data for base and pulse and what believe it can influence, so far removed from what is referenced in other places, and I found the inconsistency quite confusing. I was like, what papers are they reading? So in another textbook, they were, for acute pain, a different reference range. Chronic pain was a different reference range. It's no wonder people get very skeptical, because there are so many people producing papers with using different frequencies. So there is this overriding evidence of this frequency with this pulse has been trialed and tested in these 10 clinical trials. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I know.
There's a lot of variation out there, what people are using.
Yeah, you've got to think about the various trials that have been around and what have you. The success or failure of those trials really determines what people start to think about in terms of the frequencies. I based most of mine initially on some research carried out at Loma Linda University in California, in San Francisco, something like that. And there were trials on that, and then there was Vedreno, who did trials on looking at vasoconstriction or vasodilation on brachial arteries using Doppler effects, Doppler scanning effects, ultrasound scanning effects, to look at the changes that you could get. And most of these things, where it's soft tissue governed, came up with the fact that after 600 seconds, you've saturated the whole the whole system. You can't make anything better or make it more efficient by going greater than the 600 seconds.
That was my next question, because I put down here the variables that we have. So when we talk about variables, guys, we're talking about things that we can change, what we can influence. So with the pulse, we've got this baseline frequency, this pulse frequency. We've got the intensity, and we've got the time, and we've got the intervals of use. So intensity, can we deal with intensity? Because that
can indeed, yes. Yeah.
Explain the importance of intensity. So we've got baseline, then we've got the pulse. What's intensity?
Intensity is the strength that the magnetic field rises to. Okay, in that switch from off to on, it's the intensity it rises to. Now, a lot of people think you've got to have something very, very powerful, and I've seen quotes in various machines that have been peddled around the world, is that you've got to have a very, very powerful field. That's not true. If you think about your mobile phone, okay, the one that we're talking on at the moment, right, it works on 3 volts intensity. That's the highest voltage intensity that it works on, and the magnetic field that it generates on the antenna is only that high, but it talks to the tower 5 or 6 miles away, okay?
Ours wasn't talking to each other tonight, though, was it?
No. That was through the internet, but so it does that sort of thing. So it's not the intensity, it's the frequency, and it's the rise time. So I always say to people, the least important thing about pulse-mag therapy is the intensity. The most important thing is the rise time. Yeah.
Rise time. Okay. So the next thing,
12 volts is more than sufficient in voltage to give that sufficient rise in magnetism.
And that's why we can have these battery packs that we take around with us and have a mobile device, isn't it? So now we've got the time, and you've already said that studies have showed that having more than 600 seconds is potentially a saturation. Yes. So most of these treatment periods that somebody would choose to use PEMF is going to be around about 10 minutes. Is that right?
About 10 minutes. I mean, we on these machines put 15 minutes on it just to allow us a little bit of flexibility, of course. And but in terms of orthopedics, there was one GP that was treating osteoporosis in his patients with pulse magnetism, and he was putting his patients on for several hours. Okay. And the idea of that was that although the soft tissue wouldn't benefit from more than 10 minutes exposure, that the orthopedic side of it would, because if you think about it, when we walk, we produce these little charges in our legs called piezoelectric charges. Those are very important for maintaining bone. And when we pulse magnetism through bone, we generate charges very similar to that. So if you imagine you're going for a long run, that's going to be longer than 10 minutes, and you're going to build up bone. So if you put a patient on a longer trial, or if you're an animal on a longer period of time using pulse magnetism, then that is okay. But in terms of soft tissue, 10 minutes is probably more than sufficient. It is sufficient. More than that's not going to do any harm. People leave
that was a key question. Yeah. So if somebody did use it for longer, don't freak out, guys. You haven't actually cooked your.
You've got to do anything. Like it's one of the nicest therapies I've come across.
Yes. Yeah. And I must admit, what I love is that you can have it working. You can work alongside it. So you could be doing manual therapy. You can be doing some joint mobilizer. You can just be educating the owner, knowing that something's happening in the background.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I find really handy. Okay, now we've got about intervals of use. So we will come down to different pathologies, because we haven't actually even talked about arthritis yet. We're just still talking the modality itself. But what people have to remember is that putting a PEMF on maybe once a month for acute swelling probably ain't going to cut it.
No, I mean, basically, what we say, that 10-minute rule is a good one, 10 to 15 minutes if you want to extend it slightly for variation, for shuffling or whatever. But then from the same research that came with the 10-minute rule, the 10-minute saturation time, I should say, then suggested that the time the actual changes caused in tissue, there's 2 changes. There's one partial oxygen, the other one is voltage change within cellular structures, okay? The voltage change within cellular structures takes 4 hours to decay back to what it was before, okay?
Right.
Both the change in partial oxygen takes 8 hours. So you've got an extra bit of some extra oxygen in the tissue caused by pulse magnetism. But the 4 hours is what we work on, and that is the cycle time. So what we say, if you're going to treat, then treat, but give a 4-hour gap, let the body to reestablish itself in its normal charges. It doesn't matter if you're treated again in that time; it won't do it. It'll just raise the level a bit. It'll fall good like that. So it would be very, very simple to use, and you can't do any harm with it. If you allow 4 hours, then you're allowing the body to cycle itself, basically.
Okay. So when people are using it, for it to get the best clinical benefit, are you saying that it's something that has to be used reasonably frequently for most pathologies? As often as possible. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of therapists, for instance, veterinary physiotherapists and vets that I know as well, buy a load of equipment and hire them out because they want continuous treatment for their patients, whether it's for arthritis or for any sort of condition that they feel that it's appropriate to. So yeah, the idea is I would always recommend at least once, twice, 3 times a day if possible. But it's not always possible, but as often as possible. But if you are treating 3 times a day, give it 4 hours in between. Yeah. Right, there you go. So guys, just trying to, because as I say, my brain is not as fast as his. We're looking at quite a lot of things that we can influence, which is very different to something that you just plonk on your wrist and you leave there and you only take off when you go for a shower. So what I really learned in my simple head was this is way more complicated than can ever be incorporated into a fixed thing in a rubber band that's plonked on your wrist and left there. That was very facetious, sorry. Now, let's start looking at the pathologies that this therapy is used for. And we've alluded to soft tissue, bone fracture healing, and we're going to be talking about pain as well. Just because time is short, and this is a channel called Canine Arthritis Management, so the clue's in the title. I think we'll stick there tonight. Okay. We're looking at joint health, so we're looking at cartilage. We're going to be talking a bit about obviously pain. We're going to be talking about swelling a bit. We will also talk about myofascial kind of tension, pain, trigger points. But let's talk about arthritic joints. What is the evidence to show that this modality can influence arthritis? Well, you've got to think about the arthritis if it's the standard sort of deterioration of the cartilage, for instance, or if you've got depletion of cartilage or anything like that. The evidence that we have seen from research is that it will help. If you remember that cartilage is apositional in its growth, it grows out of the bone, in fact, from mesenchymal stem cells, and it grows at a very, very slow rate. Once you've lost a bit of it, it takes an awful long time to reestablish it. So therefore, in terms of arthritis, being a quick fix with pulse magnetic therapy, there's no quick fix. Okay. So this is not curative. That's right. It's not curative. It will stimulate, but over a very long period of time. So you're not going to get something very, very straight away, basically. But what you've got to think about are the side effects of problems where you get within the capsule, you get sort of a lot of fluid. A lot of fluid presses onto the periosteum. Periosteum of the bone is full of nerve endings. The nerve endings are pressurized. It causes pain. So one of the things that it does help with is the pain side of it, which brings into that other point of view, is that it will reduce by causing vascular dilation, and not only vascular, but also help with the lymph system to take away excess fluid. It will cause the pain to be reduced in that respect due to pressure. Are you with me? In terms of damaged pain, it will help change the receptors where you've got damage to a bone or damage to any cells around the bone, which are releasing prostanoids or prostaglandins. It will reduce the perception of pain on those, but it's a chronic one. But it's not a cure; it's just a reliever, if you like. Okay, the classical things are steroids and things like that. They shouldn't be foregone because of pulse magnetic therapy. Yeah, we're going to come back to that because I've already prepped you that I'm going to put you on the spot and say, is this a replacement for such and such? But we haven't got there yet. So basically, the truth is it can help. It's part of the toolbox. It can certainly influence the perception of pain.
Yes.
The end point of the pain of how bad it is, but it's not going to change the course of disease, if we're really honest.
It won't. Nothing really. I mean, the drug side of things is very useful because they can actually fight from within the body via various antibodies and things like that they put in with the drugs, and that is a proven technology, if you like. Pulse mag therapy is a non-drug or non-steroidal or anything like that treatment which assists, and all it can do in any situation like this is assist the body to heal. And it's like with any electrotherapies. No electrotherapy heals. If anybody says, "Oh, I've got a wonderful piece of equipment, it'll heal that problem straight away," it's not true. The body will heal that problem. As I said to you when we were in our previous discussions, even an operation which may mend a broken leg and realign the leg with various splints and wires and intermedullary pins, doesn't actually heal it. The body heals, does the healing. We facilitate the healing, but not actually do the healing itself. So all these things are the body's healing, and we are trying to help the body in the best way possible. And pulse mag therapy is fairly well established as something that will assist the body to optimize its ability. So
I love that, because that's what we're doing with everything, you know. And I love the way that you say that, because putting a rug down, changing the environment, getting the weight off, doing appropriate exercise is helping the body. But at the end of the day, the body is doing all of the work. We're just trying to put it in the best position to do the best it can.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think we quoted it once before when I did an interview a couple of years ago now, I think it was. We came up with a figure of 70% of all conditions that you might find that the vet treats or the veterinary physiotherapy treats will actually heal themselves given time. Okay, and a lot of these claims by various people say it's 70% efficient. Hey fellas, that means it doesn't work because the body is 70% efficient in itself. Okay, so you know you can. We're interested in the 30% that doesn't.
I do laugh because it is true, and I'm never going to be a good business person because stuff like that I couldn't lie from. I'd be saying to people, actually, the body's got the ability to do a lot of the work itself. Let's just get it in the position that it can do a good game. So can we talk a little bit about neuropathic pain? So followers that are thinking, where's she gone with this one?
Yeah.
The big problem about a lot of people do not understand is that a lot of these dogs end up having the pain almost bud away from the disease process. So you've got an arthritic knee, but actually the nervous system gets really, really wound up, and it starts generating its own pain state. And the knee actually calm down and go, hey guys, I'm not too bad at the moment, I'm not too swollen, I haven't been stressed too much, I'm quite cool. But the nervous system's going, pain, there's pain, there's pain. And that's neuropathic or neurogenic pain.
Yes.
So these are dogs that generally will present. So if people want to know if their dog is likely centrally sensitized or showing neuropathic type pain, your dog's reaction to something that should be averagely painful or not painful at all will be quite dramatic. So if you've got a dog that has got knee arthritis and you go to touch it and it's like, don't touch it, that would bring my alarm bells of this dog has got some neuropathic type presentation. You go to touch a dog away from their arthritic joint, they're like, please don't touch me. You're dipping, sidestepping, choosing to stay away from the family, reacting really badly. That tends to be a sign that we've got a very big wind up of a pain state. How does PEMF work with that kind of situation?
Well, if you go back to the chronic stage, chronic pain, okay, then whatever's causing the pain will generate pain signals because of the prostaglandins and things like in the area. And the only way we can do anything about that is to apply over that area with this sort of a 200 hertz frequency on a constant thing, which will then change the voltages, as I mentioned earlier on. That may reduce the pain. It won't stop the cause of the pain. It will just reduce the perception. But the problem with that is that if you have an animal that you have reduced the pain artificially by this method, then the dog, or I would assume we're talking about dogs all the time here, but the dog will probably want to do more than it should be doing at the time. So you've got to be very careful there. In that, if you take the pain away, then the stress. Just a slightly different angle. My late brother-in-law had a very bad back on one occasion, so I had a chat with his GP, and we got together and we said, right, let's try the pulse mic therapy because nothing else seems to work. And he put it on his back pain. He got a lot of relief, and he got up from one day and thought, well, I feel a lot better now. And he went out and dug his garden and put himself back in pain again, okay? Because he overstepped what he was supposed to do. You've got to remember that taking pain away in this method, as with anything, as with aspirin, or not aspirin, with codeines and things like that, is a temporary fix. Okay.
But I think that you can apply that for anything. And if anybody wants to be made to feel better tonight, I'm more than happy to put my body on the railway track. So I remember taking Holly to a hydrotherapy session, and take note, everybody. She had a wonderful session. So she'd been having a really bad time with the lumbosacral pain. I was in bits. I just didn't know what to do with myself. Went to a lovely friend of mine. We had a fantastic hydrotherapy session. Dumbo me did not put her lead on afterwards. She came out of the pool in a brilliant endorphin haze, feeling great, ran out of the pool, flew down the steps and hit the deck at the bottom because her body was not in tune with how she felt.
That's right, yeah.
And I felt sick with myself for days because that was just such a simple thing I could have avoided. And it was just thoughtless. I was just not thinking ahead. So it can actually happen with anything. Ethically, guys, what David is definitely not saying is that we leave them in pain to control their capabilities. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is this isn't something that you can plonk on and do nothing else. I think what David's trying to say is we use these pain relieving approaches to give our dogs benefits so that we can change their lifestyles to suit. So don't think that we're using pain as a controlling thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is there as an adjunct to other therapies. I mean, the manual therapies, which are brilliant, massage and things like that, can be enhanced, I suppose, to a certain extent by using pulse mic therapy.
Yes.
You can get deeper down, perhaps, than they can get down. But a lot of things can help, and I think it's any use of electrotherapies is not the panacea for everything. It's not a cure-all or anything like that. It's an aid to the body's recovery.
Yeah. Okay, because we're being very sensible and I'm following my list. Contraindications and dangers. So when people hear things like electroradiation, radiation, we're not worried about that. They're not do harm.
Yeah, I've just written a book. I'm not trying to push my books, by the way.
No, push your books.
It's called Ripples in the Ether. It's not published yet. We're just going through the stages. There's 60,000 words to get through, and we're just going through the stages of proofreading at the moment. And I do make a lot of mistakes. And fortunately, my wife's a very good.
Amazing Marjorie.
Yes, right. And she's going through it, and I've got it on the table here next to me at the moment, but I won't bore you with that. But basically, these sort of frequencies that cause problems are called ionizing frequencies, okay? And they cause problems because there's sufficient energy in those frequencies to cause cellular damage. And if they cause cellular damage, and they cause damage right down at the DNA level, then you can get tumors and things from it. That's why the typical ones that we talk about are ultraviolet. Ultraviolet is an ionizing frequency. Gamma radiation, X radiation, things like that, those are ionized. But once you get down to below 300 gigahertz, which is very, very low, which is still a very, very high frequency, you lose that ability to ionize, okay? The lower the frequency you get, the longer the wavelength, the less damage you do to tissue. Unless you overdo it, that if you put your hand in front of a very hot fire and keep it there, you'll burn yourself, okay? But you'll not cause any damage. But in terms of the ionizing capability of the therapies that we're talking about, they do not have that ability. And by the way, folks, your telephone will not boil the brain. Your mobile phone will not, because the frequency is not of an ionization nature.
It's not of an ionizing. Okay, things like cancer, pregnancy, pacemakers, metal plates, and infections.
Well, taking that, infections, possibly with the vascular dilation. I read somewhere that they recommended that when you first presented with an infection, 1 dose of pulse-mag therapy on the vasodilation would probably help to increase blood into the area, but that's all they would ever do. So it's not particularly scientific, and I've never seen any real papers on it. But that's just somebody's opinion, and that seems fairly logical. That you don't want to send pathogens around the body and things like that. So yeah, I would keep away from
metal plates. People that've got like
no
TPLO plates.
No problem. No, those are usually a non-ferrous material. You have to use a non-ferrous material in the body, and non-ferrous material is not affected by magnetism. Okay?
Perfect.
Because
and
you don't want things rusting in the body.
No, you don't.
Yeah, okay.
Somebody's got a pacemaker. Do they have to be in fear of it?
In the old days, I met the guy who first invented the first pacemaker when I was lecturing abroad on one occasion. Just as an aside,
just as an aside.
But anyway, that's a site. It's called Trendley Dean. Something I can't remember his name actually, but something like that. Weird name, American guy, very nice guy. But no, in the early stages of pacemakers, perhaps they were maybe susceptible to things, but you've got to think about it. When you walk past your fridge, you're walking past a pulsing magnetic field, okay? Your television, anything you've got with electrical these days has to change its voltage from a very high voltage to a smaller voltage, and they're all alternating voltages of 50 hertz coming out of the mains. And therefore, if any of these things are dangerous, then it would be dangerous to be in any house with the...
any house.
That's right. So most of them are not affected, and the latest ones I understand are even screened, so there's no effect.
So fine. So don't worry, you people with pacemakers. Cancer and pregnancy.
Well, again, there's no specific research about this sort of application to these conditions. For instance, tumors. There was some research that came out of Russia. I'm not sure about the credibility of the research that suggested that a very strong pulsating magnetic field over a tumor site would cause partial oxygen to be formed in it. In other words, dissociated oxygen. O2 becomes O1 plus O1, which isn't usable, and it would starve the site of usable oxygen. I, in my own case, as a veterinary nurse many years ago, had a dog. She worked for a vet, and the dog had a very large tumor on its stomach. And she rang me up and said, my vet wants to put my dog down. I don't want to put him down. Is there anything we can do with pulse magnetism? And I said, well, if he's going to die anyway, then you've got nothing to lose to try it. And she tried it, and the rather large growth on his stomach shrunk. Okay, it didn't prolong his life that much, but it did actually have an effect on the growth of it. So again, that might be in line with the Russian research. But
we do have to remember that it's an n=1 state. All the CAM followers are learning my facetious comment of n=1 does not mean science. Maybe a t-shirt. And by the way, CAM followers, Holly's Army, it's here. There you go. Just in case we've got them in the shop. Right, back to the point. So what about how long to take effect? So the final part, say we've got somebody that's got a pretty debilitated, he's a black Labrador, he's got generalized OAs, he's got multiple joints, he's got a big mane, he walks in a kind of rocking fashion, he doesn't want you to touch his back, he really displayed toes where all his weight carriages being on the front, and let him come in to a therapist and said, right, let's do what we can. What kind of time scale for this to take effect? Is this the same as omega-3 fatty acids, which we're looking at anywhere up to 12 weeks? Anything 12 weeks. What kind of time?
It's how long is a piece of string, really, because it depends on the condition, depends on the advancement of the condition, how acute it is, if it's just acute or whether it's chronic, is it early stage of chronic or is it later stage of chronic? All these things have to be taken into account. But for one thing for sure, you will help the condition in some way, but you will not necessarily help it instantly, and it might be that period of time. Can I just come back to one thing that you asked me before, which I didn't answer? It's about pregnancy, because I know a lot of people are concerned about that. There's no evidence that pulse-mag therapy will cause problems in pregnancy, but I always contraindicate, because if anybody gets any problem in pregnancy and they've been using pulse-magnetic therapy, like anything about leukemia with children around pylons and things like that, they immediately blame what is different or what they perceive as being different. And I've actually answered court cases, just one or two in my career in this particular field, where physiotherapy has been sued for putting a applicator on the back of a horse that developed cancer. It didn't develop on the back, but they wanted to find out that it was if it was cause and effect. And obviously it wasn't a massive manifold with a small applicator. It wouldn't have that effect whatsoever. But anyway, they lost the case against the therapist. I helped her win the case. But it's the one occasion, or another occasion was with a human who was feeling that the using it was causing illness and things like that. And it was purely in the head, because we had a case of students where I was using students as guinea pigs when I was doing some research at the university when I was a lecturer there, and in concert with an orthopedic surgeon, a specialist back surgeon, in fact, and his name was, no, sorry, I beg your pardon, he was a thoracic surgeon. His name was Dr. Pansin, which I thought was a good name for it. And we were looking at asthmatic students, and we had them on trial. We had them on a sort of a bed with a blanket. We used pulse-mag therapy on them, and we asked them to record after each treatment how often they use the Ventolin inhalers. And one lady said, "No, I can't do it after the first treatment. She said, it's making me feel really ill." So we said, "Well, come back and we'll try it again." And she said, "Well, I'll come back, but if I feel so ill again, then I'm going to have to stop doing it." And we did it. We actually talked to her, and coming back 4 times, just to check things. And on the last 2 occasions, we didn't apply any therapy whatsoever, and she still
She still felt.
Yeah, so it's
the power of the mind. The power of the mind is incredible.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've actually tackled quite a lot. This is the structure for the rest of the week, guys. We're doing something I'm terrified of.
Yeah.
And David knows I'm terrified of this topic. Laser therapy and LED light therapy. And then the day after that, we're doing ultrasound. And then the day after that, we're doing shortwave therapy. And then the day after that, we're doing the wrong title, which is on today, which is the electrostimulation therapy. So you will be seeing David every evening this week. Thank you, David.
Okay.
So please do tune in. I'm going to leave with what we always do, which is the 10 top tips. Now, you're going to have to be smart this week, David, because you're going to have to come up with 25 in total. So it's 5 each night for a week.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start off with tip number 10, then it's 9, then 8, 7, 6.
Yeah.
It is because what Cam wants to make sure is that we incorporate everybody into our advice pool. We see ourselves as giving out a radiation of advice, and we want to make sure everybody is affected. So this is advice that doesn't involve expenditure. This is advice that we want people to be able to incorporate tomorrow. So I'm going to start with number 10. Weight loss, guys. Weight loss, weight loss, weight loss, weight loss, weight loss, weight loss. It's just so important, and it's so at your fingertips. So all you need to do is get motivated. We have a lovely team member called Lindsay at caninearthritis.co.uk. So that's LYNSEY at caninearthritis.co.uk. And she will visually body condition score your dog if you send photos in and give you advice. So please take advantage of that service. Number 9, David.
9. Well, I'm not sure how to apply this one. A top tip with electrotherapies is make sure before you buy any equipment that it's got a background of research and that it's got a background of proven research, not just people saying it works. And a lot of companies will quote research, check that the research is actually at a PhD level that's been carried out by a very well-established university, and make sure that it's aimed at what you want it to be aimed at. In other words, don't buy equipment just for the sake of it. Just buy the equipment that has got a proven track record.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. Number 8 from me is a similar vein. I've been online a bit recently. And as soon as a website starts having references supporting product sales, I get twitchy. because a lot of these references that they list don't actually have any application to the product in hand. They're out of date references, they're the wrong species, they're poor trial design. Just because you see a list of references doesn't mean that it's going to work. So do be more savvy about that. Number 7 for you.
Oh, you keep dropping these on me very, very quickly. Number 7. What can I say? Is it's going to be an ongoing thing throughout the week, and I think we've got to think about the type of modality that we're going to use. There isn't any specific one that will cover all the aspects that you're looking at. So therefore, make sure that you are very well aware of the sort of treatment you're going to be going for. And if you're going to a veterinary physiotherapist, question why they're going to be using that particular therapy to treat your animal, and what evidence is it. It's not just that it's a nice looking piece of equipment, but it's got to be a good efficacy, and it's got to be the ones that you need rather than the ones that they want to push on you. If that's
very powerful.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Number 6. I'm so about the freebies, because I just wish that people realised how powerful they are. So number 6 for me is we've got a new tool on the website. So we've had the tool #It'sMyHome2 tool for years. Thank you guys for making. We've also now got the lifestyle tool, and I'm sure one of the ambassadors will put a link to it. And it's a really helpful digital tool for you to start looking at what your dog is doing and hazards and possible changes. So it's mooching around the house, feeding time, water bowls, sleeping, hobbies. Gives you some things to think about that might need adjusting. Number 5 for you.
The age of your pet. Okay, the age of your pet and the treatment you're going to have. For instance, if I would not apply some of the therapies we're talking this week to a puppy, I've got a beautiful puppy here, he's 14 weeks old. I would not dream of using some of the electrotherapies on it. Make sure that what you're treating and the age of the pet are compatible. What you're treating with and the age of the pet are compatible. Physically, where you've got growth plates and things like that.
So let's finish. PMF and growth plates.
PMF and growth plates, generally speaking, you've not got a big problem because the body will adjust to its size. But with other ones that we'll talk about later on this week, you can have a problem. But PMF is probably the most benign of all of them in affecting growth plates. But even then, I would, if I could use something sort of mechanical or sort of a massage or something like that, I'd use that rather than electrotherapies.
Love it. That's going to be my number 4. Please, guys, see the benefit of manual therapies. I had a very, very enjoyable moment this week. I will name drop. It was last week, in fact. Duncan Lascelles, who's been a guest recently, said to a global audience that massage and manual therapies are really underutilized in pain management. So speak to your physio, speak to your therapist, learn some techniques, incorporate them into your bond. Massage can have massive, massive benefits. Number 3.
If you're going to use these things on a regular basis, read up a little bit of the science behind it. If you haven't got a big science background, then it's going to be a little bit difficult. But if you've got an interest in it, then there are lots of books out there. I'm not just promoting my particular books. I've got several here, by the way, but there's the standard.
Well, that's what we're going to do. We can do a giveaway. So, guys, David is donating a book to a competition winner.
Yeah. Well, actual fact, I'm going to do more than that. We've got 5 here, which are all free to good homes. Okay.
Wow! And guys, seriously, I read it this weekend. It's awesome. It's so awesome. So, if you would like to email Hannah at k9arthritis.co.uk, the first 5 to email me. So, Lynn, would you mind putting my email address down? First 5 people to email me will get that book. I read it this weekend again. It is very, very good. Number 2 for me, I've said this many times before, but it's still very valid. I wish I knew what I know now when Holly was alive. I wish that I had had a greater understanding of all the interventions that I could have incorporated. So I would like you, the followers, to make sure that you tell people, tell your friends, your family, colleagues, and let's all start doing more for this disease, because it's really neglected. And just go, oh, he's just getting old, he's just getting stiff, oh, he's lazy now, he's not got the energy that he used to have, pain. So let's talk about this disease, start spreading the word. Number one, the last one of the evening. What is your final bit of advice?
Well, yeah, I mentioned that I've got a 14-week-old puppy, a border collie, a very, very beautiful looking dog. It's actually asleep at the moment, which is very, very good.
Wow.
And he is a very, very dark brown, reddish brown. He's the only one in the litter. His father was black and white. His mother was this colour, and he was the only male in the litter. So he's a beautiful animal. And we had our last dog from being a puppy, and he died of having a very acute arthritis. All I can say is keep in touch with, as my tip, with CAM, okay, and ask for help with your dog. Not just at the later stages of life, but keep in touch all the time to try and stave off the possibility of acute arthritis, which my dog unfortunately had, and he died in February of this year, and he's greatly missed. He was 40-year-old mine, but he's still very arthritic. He had to be lifted into the car and everything. So a lot of those aids as well, but if you need them, but keep in touch and keep abreast of the current research in finding out what can help your dog and make his life a lot better for a long, happy life. Yeah.
And that's why we have, as I say, I'll stand up. Holly's arm. There you go. We have a group for owners for exactly that. So we're not just a main Facebook page. We have a community group, and there's nearly 6,000 owners in there supporting each other, with us supervising and advising and keeping it all together for you guys. So please go and join Holly's Army, and the lovely Lynn will put a link. So till tomorrow, I see you again.
Okay, no problem. I hope you
don't have really annoyed with me.
I hope we don't have the technical problems that we had tonight.
No, we're not going to have technical problems, but I
know a lot about therapists, but I know very little about communication through these devices.
Fine. Tomorrow night terrifies me. I'm going to be reading during the day, trying to get a bit more with it. Tomorrow night, we will discuss lasers and LED light therapy and just try and get a little bit of a greater understanding out there. Until then, guys, thank you very much, David. I'm always...
You're welcome. Bye.
See you later.